welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever. Today is Thursday, November 6th. It's a great pleasure and honor to have with us today Vermont's Congressional Representative Becca Balint is here with us virtually. Ms. Balint was formerly a member of the Vermont Senate from Windham County from 2015 to 2023. She served as the majority leader there from 2017 to 2021 and as the president pro tem from 2021 to 2023. She was elected to the U.S. Congress in 2022 and re-elected last year in 2024. And Congresswoman Balint, thank you very much for making the time for this conversation here today. Really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Very happy to chat with you.
Well, it's been an interesting time down in Washington,
Yes.
I would imagine.
Yes.
And obviously the federal government shutdown is kind of one thing we wanted to explore a little bit. I believe it was yesterday it set the record for the longest shutdown in U.S. government history. We're now, I think, on day 37.
Yes.
The former record holder on that was about, back in the 2018 to 2019 shutdown, which lasted 34 days.
Yes.
So I guess I just wondered.
Trump beat his own record.
Right.
The dubious distinction. Yes.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I guess I just wondered if you could tell us kind of where, from your perspective, things stand at the present. Is there any dialogue going on between the leadership of the Republican and Democrat parties that might indicate we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. That's what everybody wants to know. Look, I want to just start by explaining to people like how we got here. And what I think is really important for people to understand is that the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. They knew that we were coming up against a funding deadline. We had told them we were deeply concerned about healthcare costs coming on top of their funding bill that they passed earlier in the summer, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which took nearly $1 trillion out of Medicaid, which of course, that's nearly $1 trillion out of healthcare, because we all pay for that, and certainly rural hospitals in particular, that's the margin by which they stay open. So on top of that, there was this really strong concern that we had that people were not going to be able to afford their health care through the exchange, through the ACA, the Affordable Care Act exchange, or the marketplace. And we had said through our leadership to Speaker Johnson and to Thune, we are going to need to have both parties coming together to get an agreement on this before we run up against this deadline. And what was so telling is that you had Speaker Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, Republican, and President Trump saying, well, we don't need Democrats. You can go back, you can look at the record. They said it, in public, we don't need the Democrats. We're going to do this without them. Well, when you're in charge, you've got to be able to do math. You've got to figure out how you're going to get something passed. And they refused to meet with Democratic leadership in either the House or the Senate to try to come to an agreement. And then it turned out they actually couldn't get it passed with their votes alone, that they actually needed to meet with us. To this day, there has not been any serious discussion with Democratic leadership about how to come to an agreement. And even as recently as yesterday, you had the president saying, once again, we don't have to deal with Democrats. Senators, you just need to get rid of the filibuster and we can jam this through. So I want to set that stage. The other thing I want to remind people of is it has been 15 years that Republicans in Congress have promised people that they would put forward a plan for health care that would replace the Affordable Care Act for 15 years. There has never been a plan, and in fact, they have voted between, depending on how you count it, between 75 and 100 times to dismantle the Affordable Care Act without any kind of idea of a replacement. So I give you this because a lot of people I know in Vermont are also asking me, I don't understand why you won't just do kind of a verbal agreement with Republicans. And I always say, forgive me if I don't trust them, if after 15 years of them promising that they would deal with healthcare costs and that they would deal with their stated problems with the Affordable Care Act, that they never give us their plan. They don't have a plan. They haven't had a plan. They do not have a plan now. And so it would be, I think, a dereliction of our duty as representatives of the people to say, not only are we going to roll over and agree to whatever it is that you put forward, but we're going to do that knowing that Americans cannot afford these premium increases to the Affordable Care Act, which would be in some cases double, in some severe cases it would be triple the rates. And we are strongly concerned that millions of Americans will lose their health care. So it is about health care. That's the crux of this. And you have had a presence of Democrats in DC ever since the shutdown. The Republicans have not been called back by their leader to have any kind of substantive conversations with us. And so a lot of the attention is turned to the Senate. And there have been, because they've still worked, Leader Thune has had Democrats and Republicans in the Senate working together. That has not been happening in the House. In fact, you know, it is what I was saying to a group last night here in Vermont, that it's outrageous that the Speaker of the House has given up all of the authority of House members and by extension, the people. That is one of the most frightening things for me, is he's giving up all of the power of the people by not calling us into session. So there definitely have been some discussions behind the scenes about how we get to opening up the government. We want that. We want people to get back to work. We want people to get their back pay. We want SNAP benefits to go out. We certainly don't want air traffic controllers to be working without payment. This is a very difficult situation for federal workers, but you can't pit Americans against each other. You can't hold food assistance hostage and say, well, we're going to hold this food assistant hostage, and you're going to have to throw over all of the people who are about to lose their health insurance in order to get other people food. It's sickening. It's sickening that that's the kind of politics that this president is playing. And we've never seen anything like this happen before. SNAP benefits have never been withheld during a government shutdown. The money is there to pay it. This is a decision that the president is making not to pay these benefits. And that is why we sued in court, and that's why the court ruled in our favor.
Do you think there's any reason to think that going with the continuing resolution that Speaker Johnson and his Republican colleagues have been pushing for, with the promise of serious and sincere negotiations about health care, is any kind of viable path? No, it has to be, from my perspective, knowing the calls that I'm getting to my office about healthcare increased costs and how people can't afford them. It isn't enough to kick the can and say, yes, we're going to have those substantive discussions. We need to have an agreement that is part of a CR saying, that there will be funding, whether it's a 1 year or a 2 year extension. Like, if they're serious about having a substantive discussion on healthcare, then take the ACA subsidies off the table, pay them out, whatever the agreed on extension is. But no, you've got to extend those. People have to make those decisions now about whether they're going to continue on the marketplace or go without health care. So it has to be in writing. It cannot be a handshake, because the other piece I want folks to understand is I've only been in Congress now for 3 years. And in that time, Republicans have continually gone back on agreements that they've made on spending top lines, they have clawed back money that we've all agreed to spend. They've allowed the president to make rescissions to budget packages that we've passed in a bipartisan manner. So no, it can't just be, trust us on this. We can't. It has to be part of the deal. How has the shutdown been affecting Vermonters, as far as you can tell from your position there? I mean, have you been hearing from state officials that, hey, these SNAP payments or other federal monies that we'd normally be getting and are frozen in the pipeline or whatever, this is getting to be a tough situation for us, and we need this to be resolved. Are you feeling any pressure like that from any of the state officials?
Of course. Look, I've been meeting with federal workers here in Vermont and hearing their stories of hardship and how difficult it is for them to continue to work without pay, or those who have been furloughed who, again, are not receiving a paycheck. I have been talking with folks within the legislature about how difficult it's been to try to fill these holes that are left from federal dollars not flowing. I just want to give a shout out to the legislature working with the governor through the emergency board to make sure that some state benefits for food assistance are going to go out while this is settled in court at the federal level. That is really important that they're doing that work, and I really applaud them for that. We're getting a lot of calls to the office. People are concerned about whether they're going to be able to feed their families, right? And people rely on those SNAP benefits. And I just want to highlight for people, the SNAP benefit is very modest, but it makes a real difference in the lives of people. And it isn't just, it runs the gamut. It's seniors, it's veterans, it's children who all are reliant on that food assistance. So certainly feel that pressure. And that's why it's so important when we hear directly from people impacted who say to us, this is really hard, and also we want you to keep fighting for our health care. And that has been overwhelmingly. Certainly there have been people who have said, cut a deal, even if you can't get a deal on health care, cut a deal, open the government back up. That is not the majority of the calls and the emails that are coming to us, even from federal workers in Vermont. What they're saying to us is, hold the line. Do not let them pit people against each other. We're going to withhold food or we're going to withhold health care. That is no way to run a government. And so it has been incredibly difficult to see the kind of suffering that it is senseless, it is needless. As I said, the money has been there to release the SNAP benefits, and the president has chosen not to do that. And that's never happened in a shutdown before. We have always paid for food assistance. Of course we have. That is the moral thing to do. People are hungry. We can have our political disagreements, but we feed people. And I would hope that's something that, regardless of political party, that we can all agree on as Americans, that these folks who are hungry should not be suffering because of policy disagreements.
From a political perspective, do you feel that message is getting out clearly to people, that the reasons behind why the shutdown happened in the first place, because of the health benefits issues? Do you feel that message is going out and people are understanding it, that even though there's some short-term hardship, it's worth it for the longer-term benefit?
Yes, absolutely. So what we're hearing on the phones and in emails, and it's not just in my office, I talk to colleagues across the country, it's definitely getting through. Has everyone heard that message? Of course not. Like, we have to continue to penetrate. But we saw that reflected also in the election results last night. They were overwhelmingly positive for Democrats. The shutdown, people understand, is related to health care. And we know through all kinds of public and internal polling that we've done, people trust Democrats to protect their health care. They don't trust Republicans. There are other things that they trust Republicans more on. But on health care, they do not believe fundamentally that Republicans are looking out for their health care. So that has broken through. And it is clear that the president understands that people hold his party that controls the House, the Senate, and the White House responsible, not just for the shutdown, but also for the lack of a plan that they have put forward on healthcare. And also, prices are not coming down. That's the other thing that we've heard, whether it's prices on housing, on healthcare, on groceries. So it's all related in people's minds. If they're paying this much more for healthcare, they have that much less to pay on housing, on food, on their pharmaceuticals that they need for keeping themselves healthy. It's all one package, right? We all have a household budget, and they can't just print their own money. So they know if their costs are going to go up by double in the healthcare space, they're not going to have that money to pay their utilities, which is why it was really interesting for me that Mikey Sherrill, who's Democrat, who just won her race in New Jersey for governor, she made this, a centerpiece both of her closing argument and the speech that she made on election day. She said, we have an affordability emergency right now. And that's why people overwhelmingly supported her campaign. It wasn't close. She won by a wide margin. And in order for that to have happened, we know that Republicans crossed the aisle and voted for her. And we know independents moved away from Trump and towards her. And that happened in Virginia as well. People are scared about the affordability crisis, and they do not believe that this president is focused on it.
I want to follow up a little bit on that in a minute, but I first wanted to, just before we leave the shutdown situation completely, wanted to ask, what do you think the long-term impact is going to be within Congress, between your congressional colleagues on both sides of the aisle? We heard so much about polarization and, the fact that, unlike decades ago when, people could have their arguments at the floor during the day, but could go out and have dinner and talk about their grandchildren afterwards. That era seems to have be not quite as robust as it used to be, I guess, was one way of putting it. Yeah. Do you think that this shutdown and the dynamics that have been in play is going to have just sort of amplify that division between the parties going forward, looking forward to like next year, and your ability to work together in a bipartisan way to do things, or is it just going to be once it's over, and we get back to business as usual?
Well, I'm really glad you asked this because I worry about this a lot. I worry about how we are no longer political opponents. The way that it is framed often by the press, and certainly when we look at the kind of messaging that is coming out on social media from the president, from the vice president, from Stephen Miller, it is talking about your opponents as enemies of the people, enemies of the state. And, I certainly do not want my party, the Democrats, to be adopting that kind of rhetoric. I think it's incredibly dangerous for the institution of having a democracy, but it's corroding our communities here in Vermont. It is, even today, when I think about the colleagues that I have in the judiciary or on the budget committee, my two committees, I do have Republican folks who I consider, I don't think we know each other enough to call each other friends, but I have friendly relationships with them. I have good relationships with them. And I think the thing that will need to change is that Republicans, for their part in this moment right now, when they have a president, a vice president, and all these cabinet members talking about Americans as enemies of the people, they have to be more honest with their voters about how they actually feel about this president. Because this is the piece that is so galling to many of us. Behind closed doors, when the elevator doors close, when you're talking privately. Republicans will tell you, we do not believe that what the president is doing is good for the country. We think the tariffs are a disaster. We think the way in which he talks about people in the tweets that he has that are violent, they don't like it, but they will not speak up. And I was talking with a group of business people who were down in DC last week, and we were talking about tariffs. And of course, Vermont is made up of small businesses, and that's true for lots of states across the country. And these were business people who talk to people on both sides of the aisle, right? That's what they have to do, because it's a numbers game. You got to get enough votes to move it, right? That's how the sausage gets made. And I asked them, I said, what are you hearing from the Republican House members that you're talking to? And they laughed. They said, you know exactly what we're hearing. We're hearing, we know you're right. We know that tariffs are killing us. We know that these cuts to Medicaid are going to hurt rural hospitals. We know that the way in which he is leading is fundamentally not good. They will mock him. They will roll their eyes, and they will not speak up. I would have a really different feeling about it if I were talking to true believers, okay? If they were like, yes, I am all 100% on the MAGA agenda, 100%, tariffs are great, you know, this is how we have to operate, take no prisoners. They were all on board with what Pete Hegseth was doing and Stephen Miller, but they're not. And so can they please be a little bit more honest with their own voters about the damage that they see happening to them? That's what has to change, I think. Once they do that, once they're more honest with their own voters, let's get back to having policy disagreements. Let's do that. I want that. And I know most people want that. Most Vermonters want that. They do not want us to be tearing each other down. They literally will say to me, I don't want to hate my neighbor. I don't want to feel like it's at this heightened sense of attacking one another. And I don't want that either. But in order for that to happen, they have to be honest with their voters about the fact that they know that they are voting for things that are hurting them. And that, I mean, you see some cracks, right? You see Josh Hawley in the Senate talking about how this healthcare issue has to be dealt with. You see Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I never thought I would find common cause with, saying the thing out loud that I know others are thinking, because they're hearing from their constituents about how they can't afford healthcare. And so I hope that will encourage more people to speak up. The other piece I want to say right now is that our political parties have become too much like a religion for people. And what I mean by that is not that, you know, we are worshiping our leaders, but that we identify so strongly with the political party in the same way that you identify as, you know, what your religious affiliation is. And research has borne this out. And I think that we as Americans, as I look ahead to the midterms, the case that I have to make to people who are independents or Republicans is, I don't need you to become a Democrat. In fact, I'm not asking that of you. I'm not asking you to change your identity. You can still retain your identity as a Republican or a Libertarian or whatever it is. But in this moment, we need to come together to support the Constitution, the rule of law, due process, the things that are our founding documents. And that's the case I want to hear more Democrats making. I'm not asking you to become whole cloth a Democrat. I'm asking you in this moment to say what's happening with tariffs, what's happening with healthcare, what's happening with the supersizing of ICE and detaining Americans right now, right? Somewhere around 140 cases of Americans being detained and held. This shouldn't be happening in a free society. So I think we have to get better, all of us who care deeply about this democracy and how we create a country once again where most people are living good, decent lives and can provide for their kids or their grandkids. I don't need people to change their political affiliation. I want them to just look at things in a clear-eyed manner. Are the things happening in our name in line with our values as Americans? And if not, it's okay for you to cross the aisle and vote a particular way and not feel like you're giving up your entire identity. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'm thinking about it in this moment, because I think we're asking too much of people to say, well, you have to leave a party that you've been associated with, maybe your whole life, and maybe it's generations within your household. But this moment requires something different of us.
Yeah. I mean, you point to an interesting contrast or whatever. The popular thinking, I guess, has been that it's bread and butter issues that sway voters most. And there was also people last year saying, well, yeah, but it's also about the quality of our democracy. And the bread and butter issues seem to kind of predominate. But
it's both.
Are you getting?
It's definitely a yes and. I mean, the bread and butter issues are existential for people, right? If you can't pay for your housing, if you can't pay for your health care. But I also think there are aspects of this that are making people very uncomfortable. And I was just shooting a video a few minutes ago about a case that happened in Chicago yesterday, in which ICE went into a daycare facility and dragged out a daycare teacher in front of children and toddlers and parents. I don't think most Americans are comfortable with that. We were told that ICE was going to go after criminals, the worst of the worst, gang members, not after women teaching preschoolers in a school in Chicago. So there is both the bread and butter issues of, can I provide well for my families? And it's a yes and is this the society I want to live in when I could have my own kid, right, in a school or a daycare center or churches? Because this administration has said we're not following those rules anymore. We're not following those guidelines. We will go into schools. We will go into churches. This isn't supposed to happen in a healthy democracy, and I think it's making people very uncomfortable.
Well, in the minute or two that we have left, I just wanted to really quickly shift gears to talk a bit about the elections from earlier this week. 2 days ago, Democrats swept the governorship races in New Jersey and Virginia, the mayor's race in New York City, and then also Proposition 50 out in California, which was an attempt to kind of offset an effort by the Texas government to create, I think it was about 5 new, flip 5 Democrat seats to Republicans in anticipation of next year's midterm elections. So it sounds like Proposition 50 in California passed overwhelmingly, and that will happen. But there are other states, meanwhile, that also seem to be taking steps towards redrawing their district boundaries.
Yeah.
I guess, what do you feel about all of that? I mean, it would always seem to me that the best way to go with this is like a bipartisan, non-political commission that looks at where people live and draws maps that fairly reflect the population. We seem to be getting farther and farther away from that.
Yeah. So 2 things. I just want to be clear what started this, and you alluded to it, but I want to make it really crystal clear. Governor Abbott in Texas didn't decide this on his own. The president went to Governor Abbott and said, find me 5 more congressional seats. I don't want to lose the midterms. Find me 5 seats. And what he meant by that is redraw and draw out all of the Democratic seats, essentially. That's what we're looking at, okay? California then responded and they did the right thing, which is they went to the voters. It wasn't up to a secretive commission, right? It was the voters, and voters said, Texas is doing this. Should we follow suit and redistrict mid-cycle? With the caveat, and this is the thing that gets lost in the news, with the caveat as part of that bill, which was if Texas withdraws its proposal, we will stand down. That highlighting, no, this isn't good for democracy. People in office should not be choosing their voters. Voters should be choosing their elected officials. So the acknowledgement in California was, no, this isn't good. But if you're going to do this, then we're going to follow suit. Because, again, I just want to make it really clear. The states that have had bipartisan commissions have been overwhelmingly Democratic. So we've been playing by these rules only to have the president say, you know what, you guys can play by those rules. We're going to play by a different set of rules. And what's so frustrating is I haven't talked to a single member of Congress on either side of the aisle that thinks it's good that we further gerrymander these districts. And certainly the Republicans in California, I know, were behind the scenes in the House going to the White House, going to the leadership to say, what are you doing? Have Texas stand down. We're about to lose our seats in California. It will just be tit for tat. So no, on the macro, this is bad. We should not be doing this. But on the same token, what is it that we should do when you have a president who goes to a governor and says, find me 5 more seats, I don't want to lose the midterms, and is exactly the same kind of message he gave to Secretary Raffensperger in Georgia after the election, find me 20,000 more votes. This isn't democracy. This is an autocratic style of leadership. I want to retain my power. Find me the votes I need to do that, whether it's individual votes or whether it is congressional districts. And I would not be, I would be overjoyed if the governor of Texas said, we're going to stand down. This has kicked off a ridiculous set of circumstances across the country. But he won't do that because Governor Abbott is following the orders of the president. And that is, it's bad for all of us. It's bad for all of us.
Well, this is certainly a fascinating subject and a fascinating conversation I wish we had more time for, but I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there for today. But, well, interesting times for sure.
Yeah. Can I say one last thing? Because I know you get viewers of all different political stripes. I want people, regardless of party, and whether you're not politically affiliated at all, I want you to mix up your sources of news. Okay? If you are not hearing views of people from the other side, whatever the other side is, you are in tunnel vision. And it's best for all of us to read a variety of news sources. I do, and I would encourage everybody to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's important for sure, because it's easy to kind of get sucked into one bubble and read the same thing from sources of information that you agree with, basically. And,
exactly.
it's a lot more fun.
Yes. Don't read to find people who agree with you. Read to inform yourself.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you again, Congresswoman Balint. I really appreciate your time and the update. By the time some folks watch this, hopefully the shutdown will be over and SNAP benefits and healthcare issue and all of that will be resolved. But if not, it's going to be, well, an even more interesting year.
Yes, I always say, may it be so. That's what I want to. That's what I want to.
Okay.
All right. Well,
thanks again for your time.
Oh, always happy to chat with you. Have a good one.
You too. And thanks to all of you who've been with us today. Hope you found the conversation interesting. We'll see you again the next time. Take care.